How you doing? This is Eric Michael Lloyd, and I am reading an article by Psychology. The journal is Research, came out in 2011, volume 2, number 8, page 853 through 858. There's a copyright on it as well. This one is called Mental Connect Distance, Useful for Solving Difficulties. Now, I'm not sure if this one is Creative Commons, but I do have the article, and I'm going to read some of the abstract and the summary. As the pandemic has hit the United States, we are doing the best that we can regarding it. This one is by Patrizio E. Tresoldi, Stefano Massachesi, Massimiliano Martinelli, and Sarah Cappato. This is the Dipartimento di Psicologia Generale, Università di Padova, Italy. This was received August 19, 2011, and revised September 23rd, 2011, accepted October 25th, 2011. It states the aim of this study is to provide a demonstration of the non-local property of the human mind to connect at distance, that is, without the classical means of communication. In the first experiment, 40 participants were requested to identify in 2 separate sessions 10 real and 10 false Chinese ideograms presented randomly, trying to connect mentally with the research assistant, sending correct suggestions at distance, that is, without any possibility to communicate with them by conversational means. As control condition, in one of these 2 sessions, the helper did not send any suggestion, although the receiver believed the contrary. The session without suggestion, the hits mean score was 10.55. Conversely, in the condition where the research assistant tried to suggest the correct identification at distance, the hits mean score was 11.33. That's the amount of correct interpretations, successful trials of the mental connection at a distance. Both frequentist and Bayesian statistical analysis approach allows to reject the null hypothesis supporting the alternative one. That is, the possibility of mental connection at distance exploiting the non-local properties of the human mind. A second experiment aimed at increasing the efficiency of this mental connection, taking into account task complexity and the level of absorption of participants as a personality trait deemed favorable to non-local communication. However, the results were similar to the first experiment. Although mental connection at distance seems feasible, variables which positively moderate this kind of communication are still to be identified. So there's still plenty to learn. That was as of 2011. Introduction. Is it possible to help people at a distance to make the correct choice in a situation where there is no information available to make the correct choice and there are no means of receiving suggestions from someone else using conventional communication channels, for example, a phone call, email, etc.? The answer is clearly in the negative if we are referring to a local model of the human mind, stating that the human mind can manifest its contents using only the means available to the human body, for example, the voice and movement. But what we might expect if this model is not correct and the human mind possesses both local and non-local properties, that is, human mind may operate without space and time boundaries. The first thing that comes to mind is the possibility of sending information at distance without resorting to the classical means of communication, that is, mentally. Are there theoretical models of non-local mind already available to us and empirical evidence to support them? The suggestion that the human mind may express non-local properties has its roots in Indian philosophy. The sacred texts of the Advaita Vedanta philosophical tradition, the physical universe is seen as an undivided whole in which everything is interconnected, and the plurality of empirical phenomena is the expression of unitive and underlying principle of existence and consciousness, mind, called Brahman. That's Sat Prakashanda, 2005. In terms of more recent models of human mind and consciousness, Max Velman's 2009, in his book Understanding Consciousness, developed reflexive monism, a philosophical model accounting for the problems of consciousness. This philosophical model is a modern version of an ancient view that the basic stuff of which the universe is composed has the potential to manifest both physically and as conscious experience, a dual aspect theory in the tradition of Spinoza. From philosophy. Briefly, this philosophical model posits that in its evolution from some primal undifferentiated state, the universe differentiated into distinguishable physical entities, at least some of which have the potential for conscious experience, such as human beings, while remaining embedded within and dependent on the surrounding universe and composed of the same fundamental substance. Each human, equipped with perceptual and cognitive systems, has an individual perspective on both the rest of the universe and him or herself. In this sense, each human participates in a process whereby the universe differentiates into parts and becomes conscious of itself in manifold ways, making the entire process reflexive. Another theoretical approach to non-local mind is that which sees the properties as quantum-like. So not black or white or on and off, but on a continuum, like 50 Shades of Grey. In this sense, each human participates in a process whereby the universe differentiates into parts and becomes conscious of itself in manifold ways, making the entire process reflexive. Another theoretical approach to non-local is that which sees the properties as quantum-like, similar to the entanglement or interaction at distance phenomena observed in physics. Radin, 2006, Clark, 1995. Empirical evidence. To summarize the empirical evidence supporting the hypothesis that the human mind possesses non-local properties, we will present data obtained from meta-analysis for a better appreciation of the cumulative evidence available today. This evidence will be categorized as that investigating psychological processes, psychophysiological responses, is what it states, psychophysiological responses to non-local interaction between two participants, a sender and a receiver, and investigate communication of information from a sender to be reported consciously by the receiver. The more effects of psychophysiological distant mental interaction between humans is that of Schmidt, Schneider, Butz, and Wallish, 2004, related to two phenomena: the modification of the psychophysiological activity and the trigger of the feeling of being stared at to a spatially separated and sensory isolated receiver, such as someone in a sensory deprivation tank, for example. Not the best example, but as an example. The synthesis of respectively 36 and 15 studies reveals a best evidence synthesis of 7 studies yielded a D, would be Cohen's D, of 0.05. In 15 remote staring studies related to the feeling of being stared at, it was obtained a mean effect size of D equals 0.13. What observed with psychophysiological variables has been also observed with electrophysiological measures. Achterberg, Cook, Richards, Scandish, Kozak, and Lake, 2005. Richards, Kozak, Johnson, and Standish, 2005. Wackerman, Sider, Keeble, and Wallish, 2003. But no formal meta-analysis are available at the moment. A synthesis of evidence related to overt communication at distance is presented by Storm, Tresoldi, and D. Rizzio, 2010, under revision. In the prototypical task, a sender tries to connect mentally to a receiver located at distance without any possibility of receiving information by conventional means, in order to send the content of an image or a short video clip. The receiver may be in a Ganzfeld condition or in a normal sensory one. The image or video clip is identified among 4, the target, and 3 decoys. After a period of fragmentation, during which the receiver orally describes all sensory and emotional information, or after other techniques he adopt to receive the sender information. The summary results obtained with 108 studies using the Ganzfeld technique are: random model, the ES is equal to 0.148, and the confidence interval is 90, the confidence interval at 0.098 through 0.198. So the true value lies anywhere between 0.098 through 0.198 in this study regarding mental connection at a distance. The summary results obtained with 14 studies in no altered state of consciousness are: random model, ES is equal to 0.13, and the confidence interval, the CI, is equal to 0.07 to 0.19. From the cumulative evidence available, it seems that mental communication at distance is possible. Theoretical aspects a part, however, one may wonder if this ability is of any practical importance. Measures of effect size do not convey this information. From the Ganzfeld database, the difference with respect to mean chance expected, usually 0.25%, is mean is equal to 10%, and the standard deviation is equal to 0.09 from the no altered state of consciousness. The mean is equal to 6.5%, and the standard deviation is equal to 7.4%. Is a difference of approximately 10% in a Ganzfeld condition interesting from a practical point of view? The answer is clearly subjective and depends on personal expectation, as what is known from any parapsychological research. It's almost like that whole hypnotizing thing. The person would have to believe in it and consent for that to occur. So, our study is a contribution to increase the difference with respect to mean chance expected. To this end, in the first experiment, we devised a task that could be perceived as practical by participants. We thought that if participants perceived the task as potentially useful, they would engage more deeply with it and enhance their capacity to send and receive information at distance. Now, this part is regarding this actual study. The first part was the introduction of the background, with supporting information from prior studies, as is most research articles, the setup of most research articles. But this study, mental connection at a distance, useful for solving difficult tasks. I do hope that it is useful at this point to solve difficult tasks, such as a pandemic or mass virus or anything that would affect the world globally. So this is where we're getting into their actual study. Patrizio E. Tresoldi, Stefano Massicesi, Massimiliano Martinelli, and Sarah Cappato. Okay, that's their study, and that is from Padova, Italy, the Università di Padova. Okay, 2011. This article was accepted. So once again, our study is a contribution to increase the difference with respect to the mean chance expected. The author's right. To this end, in the first experiment, we devised a task that could be perceived as practical by participants. We thought that if participants perceived the task as potentially useful, they would engage more deeply with it and enhance their capacity to send and receive information at distance. In the second experiment, we aimed to explore the role of individual differences, testing the role of and absorption as personality traits and the role of task complexity as positive moderator variables affecting the efficiency of mental connection at distance. Experiment number 1, method. Experimental design. The dependent variable, the number of correct identification. Independent variable, the condition of suggestion at distance. Okay, so number of correct was the dependent variable, and the independent variable, which would be x, dependent variable would be y, the independent variable x, the x-axis would be condition of suggestion at the distance. Okay, the condition, whatever condition they were for the study. Control condition, experimental condition, things like that. Participants. A convenient sample of 40 participants was recruited from the students and personnel of Padua University. That's P-A-D-U-A University. They were invited to participate in an experiment to study non-local properties of the human mind by a research assistant. The final sample comprised 14 males and 26 females with a mean age of 26, standard deviation of 4.3. So almost a generalized sample for the most part. 25% males and 50% to 75% females. For their participation, which lasted an average of 30 minutes, they were reimbursed with €5. Procedure and material. The experiment took place in 2 of the department's labs. Each participant was seated in front of a PC monitor and was informed that the experiment consisted of 2 sessions and that he twice had to recognize 10 real Chinese ideograms and 10 false ideograms. So which ones were real, which ones were false in Chinese? Before starting the experiment, participants were asked about their familiarity with Chinese ideograms. They were enrolled only if they declared no or almost no knowledge apart from the capacity to recognize them as probably Chinese or Japanese ideograms. The choice of this material was dictated by the aim to devise both an attractive task for participants and a task that could not be solved using previous knowledge. Furthermore, participants were informed that the novelty of the experiment consisted in the possibility of being helped in their decisions by a research assistant who could see the ideograms on a PC located in a distant room by means of an internet connection. The research assistant could help the participants by suggesting the correct answer at distance, but only mentally, because no other means of classical communication was possible. No other means of classical communication was possible. To help the receiver, the research assistant used a memo with the real ideograms printed on it. The answer. Although the possibility of being helped at distance was deemed improbable. Participants were requested to adopt a positive approach towards this possibility and to answer only after at least 15 seconds of mental connection, with the helper following their preferred means. The material, see real and false ideograms in the appendix, was written by hand by a native Chinese scribe on white paper, the guarantee about the accuracy of real and false ideograms, scanned and transformed into digital JPG images to be used in the software for automatizing the random presentation of ideograms and the sorting of participant responses. Okay. After the presentation of each ideogram in the middle of the PC screen, the participant had to decide if it was real or false, pressing the Z or the M keys on the PC keyboard, respectively. The software was compiled in E', and randomization was obtained using the dedicated subroutine. In order to prevent learning, no feedback was given after each response. At the end of each session, only the number of correct identifications was presented on the PC screen. Okay. So they didn't let them know which ones they got wrong. They let them know out of so many how many they got correct. To control whether the suggestion at distance could produce better results with respect to a classical situation where only pure intuition was used, in one of the two sessions, the helper was occupied with an irrelevant task and the monitor connected with that of the receiver was turned off. The order of the help sessions alternated among participants, but they completed both sessions believing that they had always been helped at distance. Experiment number 1. Results. In order to test the robustness of the statistical results, we used both a frequentist approach following APA 2010 statistical recommendations and a Bayesian one. That's pretty cool. I've never seen them use two statistical approaches before. Typically, people use the frequentist approach in the articles that I've read. Order of helping sessions. The mean of hits of the help sessions according to their order, first or second, were almost identical. No suggestions. First session, the mean, M, was equal to 10.4, and the standard deviation equal to 1.9. Second, the mean was equal to 10.5, and the standard deviation was equal to 1.8. Suggestion at distance. The mean is equal to 11.4, and the standard deviation is equal to 1.7. Second, The mean, M, is equal to 11.2 and the standard deviation equal to 1.4. Consequently, they were analyzed together in the following statistical analysis. Descriptive statistics. Mean, standard deviation, sum of correct identification. Hits, minimum equals 0, maximum equals 20. That's the most that one can get, 100 out of 100. An A for all intents and purposes, are presented in Table 1. Comparison of the mean chance expected. The comparison with the MCE, or mean chance expected, see Table 2, was done using both a one-sample t-test and a binomial test to consider both a continuous and discrete distribution. For the frequentist approach, all statistics were one-tailed, fixed at A is equal to 0.05, so that's a 95% confidence interval, and analyzed using bootstrap procedures based on 1,000 samples. So that would be, I'm assuming, the control. For the Bayesian approach, a Bayesian factor, BF10, comparing the alternative versus the null hypothesis ratio, was calculated using the software available at http pcl.missouri.edu/Bayes factor. That's from Roeder 2011 for the binomial distribution, and the software available at www.ruderwetzels.com SD test. That's from Wetzels, Raj Makers, Jacob, and Wagon Makers, 2009. Comparison between the two conditions. The statistical comparison between the sessions with and without suggestion at a distance is presented in Table 3. Experiment number 1, comment. Distance. Direct comparison between the two sessions confirms the superiority of suggestion at distance to session without suggestion. Okay? There's a benefit of sending suggestions at distance without the use of conventional communication, speaking in person, email, writing, things like that, face-to-face. The net result of a mean increase of 10.3% with respect to the MCE, quite low to be of any practical use. So statistically, that is but it does have value. To test if it were possible to increase the result with respect to the MCE, we decided to carry out a second experiment with more attention paid to individual differences and task complexity. Once again, this is the work of Patrizio E. Trizoldi, Stefano Massicesi, Massimiliano Martinelli, Cappato, researchers from Padova University, the University of Padova, Italy. With respect to individual differences, we concentrated on the degree of absorption, a particular personality trait that was found favorable to the expression of non-local properties of the human mind. That's interesting. Absorption. That's definitely novel for me, but that would probably be related to the ability to have this phenomena occur correctly with the number of a higher number of correct hits, or an increased value of correct hits successfully. Probably related to that. Absorption, that is. With respect to the task complexity, we realized the task of suggesting if an ideogram was correct or false is particularly demanding for the helper if she or he is not familiar with the characters. That would be a caveat or a factor within that equation to take note of or to indicate. Although we could expect some learning In the course of the experiment, the lack of familiarity meant a continual check of ideograms in the memo, disturbing mental connection with the receiver. So uh, that should be factored in as well. I'm not sure, I haven't read the entire thing, but they, as as you do in any research or any good research, to test this hypothesis, we devised a simpler task, namely a choice between two pictures representing the sun and the moon, respectively. So, if that were a problem, that means that being identifying the Chinese characters correctly, despite the semi-instantaneous learning effects from one trial to the next, then pointing out the sun and the moon using the mental connection at a distance should be relatively a lot easier to be able to discern what weight that factor would have. That being, that factor is lack of familiarity with the Chinese characters, right? Okay, so experiment 2. So this is the second experiment. Method. As anticipated with this experiment, we aimed to increase the net result with respect to the MCE, taking into account the degree of absorption. That's that trait that we talked about as well regarding mental connection at a distance. As individual difference in personality and the reduction of the complexity of the task as a moderating variable. Okay. So the complexity of the task would moderate when or if and when these factors come into play, right? Experimental design. The dependent variable, once again, is the number of correct identifications, right? So, for example, someone shows me a water bottle and I'm able to identify that's a water bottle. That would be a correct identification. Somebody shows me this and I say that's a water bottle, that would be an incorrect identification. Iron pills. Not for me. Independent variable, condition of suggestion at distance. Okay, that would be the independent variable. Okay, the variable that is, for all intents and purposes, according to statistics and researchers, manipulated, changed. Okay, participants. A convenient sample of 70 participants was recruited, as in experiment 1, from the students and personnel of Padua University. So I finally got that right, English. They were invited to participate in an experiment to study non-local properties of the human mind by a research assistant. They do have the table here with all the numbers that I have not read off yet, but here is the table that they put with their data. Any good research does have their data and their tables and their charts. There it is there. The level of absorption, which is that trait again, pertaining mental connection at a distance. Okay, so this is a personality trait that they're identifying as well. Was predefined as low if the total score on the Telegen Absorption Questionnaire. Okay, predefined as low if the total score on the Telegen Absorption Questionnaire, TAQ, it's an acronym I just made up, Telegen and Atkinson 1974, okay, that's where that's from, was at or below 20 and high if it was above 20. So the Telegen Absorption Questionnaire, if it was lower than 20, it was at or below 20, then it was low, and it was high that score was high, the absorption score, the TAQ absorption score was high if it was above 20. Okay, so 20 would be the mean. It would be the cutoff. So an equal number of participants with low and high degree of absorption was predefined. When the total of 35 was obtained in a group, participants were recruited only if their absorption level met the inclusion criteria of the remaining group. The final sample comprised 61 males and 9 females with a mean age of 27. Standard deviation is 3.5, so it wasn't a equally representative sample, as you can see, but I do appreciate them noting all of that here in this research. For participation lasting an average of 30 minutes, they were reimbursed with €5. Same as the first one, they were reimbursed the same amount of money. Procedures and materials. The procedure was identical to that in first experiment. The only difference was the material. Instead of ideograms, 2 images were used, a sun and a moon. In this case, the task of the receiver was to guess which image the helper was suggesting to him or to her. The order of images to be suggested was randomized, creating a list of 0 sun and 1 moon from the site www.random.org for each participant. So, randomization procedure came from that website. Experiment 2 results, descriptive statistics. Here's the part most people wait for, the conclusion, the results, outcome, statistics. Means, standard deviation, and sum of correct identification. Hits, minimum number is equal to 0, maximum number is equal to 10. Obtained by the low and high level absorption groups are presented in Table 4. Direct comparison between the 2 groups. The statistics related to the comparison between the 2 groups of participants are presented in Table 5. From this comparison, it is evident that the 2 groups performed at similar level, and there was no support for a differential ability of one group over the other. Wow. Consequently, all further analysis were performed only on the whole group. Comparison with mean chance expected. The same frequentist and Bayesian statistics were used as in Experiment 1 and are presented in Table 6. Experiment 2, discussion. The results of Experiment 2 converged to support the hypothesis that suggestion at distance was effective with respect to MCE, representing the null hypothesis, with a net increment of 8.8%. The results are no better than those obtained in Experiment 1. Okay? However, the net increase with respect to, it appears that they're speaking about absorption, maybe a typo, MCE was 10.3%. Currently, our hypothesis that absorption level and task simplification could increase performance with respect to the MCE is not supported. Okay? So once again, it states consequently, our hypothesis that absorption level of absorption, the personality trait that they have operationally defined in this article, research article, and how simple the task was, whether it could increase the performance of mental connection at a distance, the number of hits, that is, with respect to the mean chance expected, was not supported. So it did not have an effect on whether they got better at the successful transmission of basically psi phenomena, mental telepathy, or mental connection at a distance. General discussion. If they are not extraordinary, our results are close to or better than those obtained with a Ganzfeld procedure, suggesting that non-local communication may be observed even without an altered state of sensory perception. Clearly not a practical solution. The findings of the present study give more support to the hypothesis that the human mind may express non-local properties, both to receive and to transmit information as documented by the meta-analysis of Storm, Trizoldi, and D. Rizzio, 2010, and Trizoldi, 2011, examining the cumulative evidence obtained up to today. I do have that study, but the meta-analysis will be a lot longer than this one. Although we sometimes described our task from the participant's point of view, what we observed may be not a transmission of information, but rather only correlations between two entangled minds. That's interesting. What some philosophical models of quantum mechanics interpretations tell us is that deep physical reality is interconnected beyond the ordinary boundaries of space and time, that in turn tell us that our minds, consciousness must also be interconnected. Not occasionally, but always. If this is true, then what we observe is our experiential, subjective sense of this underlying connectedness. Therefore, suggestion at distance is not transmission of anything. It may be, rather, a result of focusing one's attention on another person, because we are already continuously connected to that person all the time, and to everything else. By analogy, if we had a ratio that transmitted everyone's speech in the universe to us simultaneously, all we would hear would be noise. But if we tuned the radio to one frequency, we would hear one specific person. We think that mental connection at distance is the act of attention tuning the radio. Here's the second experiment's data. I'll put a link to this as well. Hopefully this is helpful during this time. Even if there is some hypothesis, there is a lack of knowledge about the moderating factors influencing the performance of non-local mental connection. As far as individual differences are concerned, there is insufficient information about the role of some personality traits. In experiment 2, we failed to identify the role of absorption level. Among other personality traits, there is the sensation-seeking one. Recently, this trait has been observed as a positive mediator in tasks requiring participants to anticipate future information. BEM, or BEAM, 2011. In general, the search for a good personality trait should consider those which favor mental and emotional bonding. Miller and Rogers, 2001. But little is known about connection. Maybe the degree of emotional bonding between colleagues, for example, observed an increase of correct hits when the sender was a parent or a close friend in tasks where the receiver had to guess who had rung or emailed them. Sheldrake and Smart, 2005. Sheldrake and Bihari, 2009. A plausible explanation is that people who share emotional and communication bonds for a long time find communication easier whether using classical or non-local means. Although the evidence supporting the reality of non-local perception and communication abilities of the human mind is quite robust, these abilities are only likely to be appreciated by laypersons and scientists alike. If demonstrations of their practical use are provided, Our study is a contribution towards this goal, and although our findings are not particularly exceptional, we hope more people will become interested in this research field to contribute to enlarging our knowledge of the human mind. It has the acknowledgments here as well. We acknowledge the proofreading service for English revision and the suggestions of the referee, which helped us to improve the clarity of the paper. It has the references here as well, which I also will put up as researchers do regarding showing their work in APA style and format. Okay. Thank you for your time. This is Eric Michael Lloyd, researcher, a master's student in clinical psychology, neuropsychology concentration, and registered behavioral technician at the moment. And be safe, stay clean, and hopefully this helps. Bye.
Hey, Michael.
Hi, Mom.
Yep. Let me yell to Mom and then go take my shower. Hold on. Hi, Mom. I'm gonna take my shower. I'll be back.